Well, I've seen some of these, and so I'm just like, some of this makes me feel old because there was one that's like using the N word as like a brotherhood. Like, how? I don't understand that. And there was another one that said something about we've worked hard to be called the N word. Like, maybe that's not what you meant to write. So I'm going to say something else. But people are all over the place on this argument, more so than they were when I was an undergrad. Yeah, so the slippery slope there is when we talk about offense and restricting words for one group or other groups of people against one group, and we don't do that for everyone. I think the struggle with hateful words is that it does hurt your feelings, right? It's not the sticks and stones break my bones, and words don't hurt. They hurt, and they make you, something comes up when you say certain things. For a lot of people, myself included, you say the N word, I'm going to think something. I'm going to feel some feelings, and I have to sort that out and figure out how I'm going to act. But to say that it should be considered, it is considered offensive, it should be protected by free speech, I think we open ourselves up to other problems, right? If we think about what we type on some of our Twitter accounts, if we think about what we say to some of our friends when other people are around, other people would consider some of those things hate speech. I think when we start saying that this word is bad because Black people don't like it and no one should be able to use it, then we open up ourselves to say, well, what are we going to say about women? Can we start to say the B word? What about that C word? What about gay people? Can we use the Q word? Don't ever say the F word. Then we start to limit things. And then I think we start to limit conversations about how we can move forward in this country and in society and really deal with differences. When we start to limit words, we get into censorship. Personally, Takeshia does not like to use the word at all. I don't think anyone should use it. Just the history with the word, the connotations behind it. Again, when I hear the word, I know how I feel. I think about my ancestors, right? Like dead people I'll never meet. Some people I get to read about because of some of the things that they've contributed to our society, but how they were treated and how that word was used to dehumanize and commodify them. That's not something that I want to be identified with as a Black person. And so I couldn't imagine calling another Black person that. Now, it would be hypocritical of me to sit here and say that I've never said it, right? I think there's some situations, dealing with people, perhaps men, who haven't made me necessarily the happiest human. And I've said, oh, that N-word with an A at the end because there's a difference. And those are moments that I'm proud of. And so those are times when I challenge myself to use something else because what are you really trying to get at? I've heard the arguments that it really just means ignorant person. Well, I think there are other things that we could say to kind of describe those people. So for me, I prefer for no one to use it. Just the history attached to it for me is too heavy. And again, to say that it's okay for this group, but not for this group, we get into that dangerous area where we start to control what people can say, and it really doesn't do much to move conversations forward. Yeah, I think so. One of the things, and I just got out of a class I teach first year students. It's called Black Women in Society. Fantastic class. In previous years, I've taught MLK and Malcolm X, talking about their teachings in the civil rights movement and who's left out of the movement and what it means for us now. And one of the things that I've noticed year after year, as students get younger, people think that the changes and the struggles that we've had with race and racism in the United States is something far removed, right? So we think that 1965 is 100 years ago. My mother was born in 1963. So in her lifetime, she's experienced various things related to race in the United States that shaped who she is and shaped how she raised me as an African American woman in the South and in the United States. That being said, we aren't far removed from those things. But yet it feels like it is. And so when we have these conversations about using the N-word, my mom, when she started school, went to segregated schools, even though this was well after Brown versus Board of Education when she started school, so well after 1954. most schools in the South didn't integrate till mid-60s, early 70s. As people are integrating these schools, people were calling them the N-words, making them feel unwelcome. So the history for a lot of people, I think, is lost. I don't know.
And you mentioned before some of the cards that you read about, and that's the argument that I get a lot too, is that people will say, it's the word we're trying to reclaim, and stuff like that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the reclamation movement is interesting. There are a lot of communities, minoritized communities, women, LGBTQ individuals, Black people, other folks as well, who have reclaimed terms that have been pejorative in the past. And while I understand the sense of power, I think it's hard to say for those terms, for those groups, how it makes every individual feel, right? And so clearly Black people don't agree in these cards that we've looked at. Some people are like, yes, use it. Some people are like, no, never use it. Some people are like, only my friends can say it, but you can't say it. And so I think it's important for us to treat every individual as an individual and kind of see what their preference is, right? And so that's the importance of forming relationships. Like, if I'm in a relationship with you, I can ask you, well, how do you feel about this? Tell me your experience. Why do you feel this way? Maybe then I can take that information and educate other people. Overall, I still struggle with the reclamation movement. As a Black woman, I don't want other women calling me the B word. I'm good on that. I don't find anything positive in that. I don't refer to my friends as my B. No, you're my friend. You're my girl. Like, we can call somebody something else that's more empowering. But I also understand the empowerment that comes from reclaiming those terms and taking that power back for people who need to do that. Great question. I think we've made a lot of advances. I think that we have lots of different types of people coming to college and institutions, and it's great. I think we have a lot of work to do. And it really comes from how people choose to build relationships and connections with one another. At this point, I can choose whether or not I want to be your friend based upon what you look like. And we have to figure out what can we do as humans to get people interested in other humans so that we can figure out how to be more humane in our actions. I think what's great about these activities and having people actually write on a card, that they had to come to a table, interact with the person, and someone could see what they were writing. The challenge with doing that on social media and a phone is I can be Takeshia, the Twitter ghost, and say all of these things about people and never have that connection because I'm not really interacting with anyone. And so I think on a collegiate setting for us as college administrators and my colleagues, we have this conversation all the time. How can we provide opportunities for people to really engage and make community? I think it's challenging right now. I think there's a lot of rhetoric from a lot of places that makes these conversations hard. I think, and that's my challenge with the conversation with First Amendment rights versus who should say something and who shouldn't say things. Because again, when we get into that point where we don't talk about it, then we don't allow for those moments for people to grow. Growth comes from being uncomfortable. And sometimes we have to create those environments in a safe way so that people can learn and grow and have those experiences. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Any other questions?
I guess what is something that you would say to someone who says we don't need to have this conversation about the N-word?
I think there are a lot of things that could be said. Clearly, there's a need for the conversation on multiple levels. Individually, I think it's important because, again, we see from the results of this activity that there are various perspectives on this. Some people want to be called the N-word. Some people only want you to say it in rap songs. Some people want you to skip the word in songs. Some people feel like it's something that they can reclaim, and there are others of us who are just like, don't say it. Find something else. And so those various perspectives are out there, and it's important to know those things and figure out why those things matter to people. I think it's important for your individual connections, how you have those relationships with people. You don't want to offend people. In my positive mind, in my happy mind, I don't think that people, for the most part, don't go around wanting to offend people. I think they genuinely just sometimes don't know. And this is what they do in private, and they say it, and it's just like, well, I thought it was okay, and it's not okay. And so we have to have those conversations so that people can learn more about each other. It's important, but it can't just stop there, right? And so we have the history of the N-word. The NAACP is a national organization. I recall when I was an undergrad, they had this whole ceremony to bury the N-word. They had a funeral. It was quite interesting. And they were like, we aren't going to say this anymore. You really should look it up. It was really interesting. But here we are in 2018 still having the conversation. So that tells me that there's something going on in society. There's something going on with people where we feel like there's something wrong with this word that we have to have this conversation. I would argue that there are other communities that have similar issues that Black people are having. But when it comes to race in the United States, it always goes back to Black and white, because we have not figured out how in this country to have that conversation about racial relations between Black people and white people and in a way where we can move forward. And so until we have that conversation and move it beyond just the individual level, right? Because we're going to hurt each other's feelings individually all day long. That's just what happens as people. But when we think about the structural things, the institutional things, the impact of this, beyond just you hurting my feelings, how are you inhibiting my opportunities, my access to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness because of the thoughts that are associated with this word and the actions that come along with it? When we can move the conversation to that point, then we can move the conversation forward.